rules involved in games. Oh. Okay. Rules. What else? Yeah, Connor?
It requires strategy, but I mean, cookie clicker, I don't know what kind of strategy for that.
Strategy. There might be strategy. What else? Mark?
Usually you have some way of failing.
Some way of failing. Failing is involved in games. Yes.
There are multiple players, there might be winning and losing.
Players. That's a great word. It's usually players for the game. What happened there? Don't need that. Okay. So, and also winning and losing. Yeah, it's Connor.
Decision making, and also some occasionally like elements of randomness.
Decisions. Randomness. Cool. Yeah, JD.
It's compelling.
Compelling. We need reasons to play games. Yes. Me.
Frustrating.
It can be frustrating. Yes. Other thoughts on what a game is? Got all these things involved. Might not have to have all of them. There was a question about, does it have to have strategy? Does it have to have failing? Does it have to have a winning and losing idea? Does there have to be randomness? Not necessarily, but there's some reason that all these came up. It's a really big question that people try to figure out. What is a game? If we're going to be making games, we need to sort of have some clarity. What is this thing that we're doing? So let's look at some other people's ideas about what a game is. Okay, so Wikipedia says the first source we should always go to, right? A game is a structured playing, usually undertaken for enjoyment, sometimes used as an educational tool. Did we use any of those words?
Fun.
Fun?
Analogous to enjoyment.
Analogous to enjoyment, yes.
We had rules. Structure.
Structure is sort of close to rules, but not. Yes. Did we talk about education?
Yeah.
No. Do you think that's a good piece of a game that we should have thought of? Most
Possibly.
games. So
Well, you learn something in every game you play, even if it's just the rules of the game.
you learn something. Maybe it's just the rules. But sometimes games are written as educational things. You play a game so you learn some environment. You play a simulation. You play a game so that you learn how to play the game, so that you learn how to move your fingers faster. I don't know. There's lots of things you could do, but it's related. So that's what Wikipedia says. Here's what the dictionary from Google says. It's a form of play or sport, usually competitive, played according to rules decided by skill, strength, or luck. So we got some of those words in there.
You're talking about like a physical game.
They're usually talking about physical games. Form of play. Play is a word that we need to start distinguishing from game. You play games, but not all things that you play are games. So, article on Kama Sutra, a game has explicit rules and goals and is played with a primary purpose of learning. You might disagree with that a bit. We don't always learn from games, but this is somebody's definition of what a game is. Again, rules, explicit goals. Someone else said there are 6 bullet points. If you can find them, then you have a game. There are rules, variable and quantifiable outcomes, so you don't get the same exact thing every time. Valorization of outcomes. What do you think that means?
It's a reward system. Like
Reward system.
Like you earn an achievement or you get like a cut or something.
Yes, achievements, you want them, those are good. The valor is talking about the good and the bad part. It's like you don't just play it and then it's done. There was there was valor attached to those outcomes. Some of those outcomes are appealing. Some of those outcomes you should avoid. So the achievements, they try to make the game appealing. They try to make it so that you want them. There should be effort involved. The players should be invested somehow. They should care which outcome happens. It's not just you flip a coin, you get heads. That's the end of the game. That's not enough of a game for them. You need to care if it was heads or tails. There has to be something attached. And it's negotiable for this person if there's outside consequences or not. If it matters in the real world if the game was won or lost. Not necessarily a part of it, but it could be part of the game. Yes?
So is this definition saying a game has to have all of these, or can it have some of these?
This definition was trying to say that a game has the first 5 and maybe the 6th one. From the article I was reading. A game should have rules, variable outcomes. Those outcomes are either good or bad. The player has to do something to achieve an outcome, and the player has to care about the outcome. So, another idea. Trying to be more scientific, more rigorous. Wikipedia was just, it's a game, it does stuff. This one's trying to be a bit more strict, a bit more regulated. This is exactly what a game is, and defining those boundaries very clearly. There's a great book called The Rules of Play that just talks about play in games total. They try to distinguish play from a game. Play is free movement within a more rigid structure. There are some rules to when you play, but you can do a lot of stuff, and you can just explore. A game is a system in which players engage in an artificial conflict defined by rules that result in a quantifiable outcome. Getting similar. What new words does this one introduce? Conflict. We didn't talk about conflict before. Do you think conflict is an essential or usual part of a game? Usual. So how is conflict expressed in games?
Enemies.
Enemies. Players might have enemies of what? Anything, so specifically.
Like people.
There could be orcs, there could be other players are the enemies. There could be a cooperative game where there's 5 people trying to destroy something together. You could be playing against the rules of the game, but there needs to be some conflict. Sort of what they were talking about where some of the outcomes are good or bad. You have to be invested. It's a different way of saying it. What else is new about this definition? System. What does that mean to you?
Like the game world, how all the rules and the physics of it and how you can interact with it come together.
Usually it's a very tightly woven system. There's ways to say this game doesn't work. This game is broken. Because this rule over here doesn't really fit with the rest of what's going on. The rules are not independent things. Your actions are not completely independent. There's a whole system that gets created. And thinking about a game as a system can be a powerful way of trying to understand what's going on in the game. All of the rules, all the players, all of the pieces, components of the game are coordinated and have to act in concert. You're not just creating something that is running off by itself. It's like a symphony. It's like some creative enterprise where everything has to be in harmony and working together to make the game. So that's one idea of a game. Okay, any other thoughts you have based on seeing some of these other definitions? Okay, let's go on then. There are a couple dimensions that we can put a game. We have some idea about what a game is. These are some ways to try to classify what is this game. Once we know something's a game, where does it fit? What type of game is it? So the first one we can think of, the theme and the narrative of a game. What kind of themes and narratives do we have for games? you understand what I mean by narrative and theme?
Like what type of story does it have?
The story, right? The environment, the reasons that you're playing, the English person's perspective, English major's perspective on a game. What kind of themes are there in games? What do you do when you play a game? It's not just I push this button and this box moved.
Are you talking about genre?
Not genre, but theme.
Save the world.
Save the world. That's a wonderful theme. What other themes? Zombies. Those kind of things, right?
War?
War could be a theme. Yes, this game is about war.
Eat the world.
What else?
Beat the world. Like you're competing against everyone else in the world. You gotta be the best. Like get the high scores or something.
Not necessarily a theme. That's going to fall somewhere else. But themes, I'm just thinking like if you go to a bookstore, what kind of categories of books are there?
Apocalypse.
There's the apocalypse where you have to save the world. There's the zombies.
Strategy.
Strategy is going to fall somewhere else.
Science fiction?
For like science fiction, yes. World of Warcraft is what type of theme?
Fantasy.
Fantasy, yes. There could be like a crime kind of theme to a game, right? You're a detective and you're trying to solve something. Those are themes that you could say, we're trying to work in a creative enterprise and make a game that lets people into this type of world. So when you... Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Question.
But you also miss romance.
I did miss romance section, yes. And the paranormal teen fiction, right? Paranormal romance section. What? No, if you go to a bookstore these days, you can find the teen paranormal section just by looking for all the black covers on a book. That's what you do. You find that section, and you're like, there are a lot of books in here. People love reading those books. So it's a theme. It's a genre. There probably aren't many games related to it, but people could make a game with that theme. Zombies, vampires, werewolves, all that stuff stuck together with romance. Okay, so that helps us with theme and narrative. You look at a game, you can figure out what's the theme, what's the narrative, what kind of story is being told by this game. Okay. Within that, there's usually a discussion of emergence versus progression. This is talking about the word system that we saw before. And you can look at a game and say, how much free do you have in this game? There are some games where your narrative follows almost the structure of a novel, structure of a TV show. You are just playing along and hopefully doing the right choices and actions. And to win the game, you have to do exactly what the character should do at every step. That's going to fall on the narrative progression side. They're trying to lead you through a story. On the other side, there's just a system where there's rules, but you get so much choice and freedom. There is no real one path you have to follow, but it's a choose-your-own adventure game. You're trying to follow different choices, and depending on what you choose, you get to go to some outcomes instead of others. Different games have a different level of emergence, level of freedom within that system. So that's something else to think of when you're saying, here is a game, what type of game is it? Is it a scripted game, or is it an open system type of game? Yeah.
There are games that cross that boundary.
There are definitely games in the middle. There are some games that you might have 5 different outcomes. You play the game for 3 hours, and depending on what you did, you end up in one place or another. If you're familiar with the game Spore or Civilization games, something like that. There's different paths and different